Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Amit and Rishabh. You both are doing a great job, with the Salesforce Kanpur user group. Thank you for giving us all the amazing sessions that you've been doing, and from all of us from the Trailblazer community, a big thank you. So welcome all today. And before I get started, just a few ground rules I wanted to talk about. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm going to keep the session interactive. So anytime I'm asking for your inputs or your perspectives or thoughts, please feel free to go in and say whatever you feel in the chat. There is no wrong answer. So just tell me what you feel, when we're discussing through items. And if while you're sharing in the social media, I would really highly recommend if you're sharing not just the slides. In fact, even if you don't share the slides, I'm perfectly fine, because it'll be great if you can share what you learned from the session. If something that you're taking away from today, based on what Agile means to you, or based on what Agile in Salesforce means to you, try to share a few words about the learning, not just the screenshots from the session. It's just my recommendation. If you feel, if you want to add anything more from your learning, it would be of immense pleasure for all of us. All right, we'll get started. So today's session, we'll be talking about when Salesforce met Agile. A little about me. My name is Sudha Sundaram. I have 12 years of experience, predominantly in the Salesforce and the Agile world. In my last position, I'm actually currently on a career break, and in my last position, I was vice president at Citi. I was in charge of the program management, leading the Salesforce programs. Over the last decade, I've coached several organizations in their journey of being agile. I have a certified Scrum professional, Scrum Master, and a PMI ACP certified professional as well. And in the Salesforce space, I've spent the equal number of years in the Salesforce space, almost 12 plus years now. And I hold 11 Salesforce certifications, which include application architect. I'm also a co-founder of a website called Salesforce Couple, along with Prashant Nambishan. So we have a ton of Salesforce and Agile blogs there. We are pretty new to this space, so we just started this year. So if you're looking for any information around Agile or how do you use Agile in Salesforce, more relevant to the session, and if you're looking for any Salesforce articles, we've tried to be a little different. We have places where you could go and learn Salesforce concepts, and also we have places where you could go and learn about business scenarios and see how do you plug in Salesforce out of the box features to those business scenarios as well. So feel free to go and subscribe yourselves to the website, and I've also provided my LinkedIn and Twitter handle. If you would like to follow me or ask any questions, please feel free to. So in today's session, I wanted to cover a few topics. I'm sure 1 hour or 1.5 hours is really not enough to cover a lot in Agile, but I'm going to try my best to share a good experience with you all. So I'm going to talk a little about when do we use Waterfall and when do we use Agile, right? And then I'll navigate a little bit into the introduction of Scrum, how Scrum roles comes into play, what are the Scrum ceremonies involved. And then I'll move on to a little bit of a story, a tale actually when Salesforce met Agile. And after which we'll be talking a little bit about how do you create good user stories, how do you prioritize it, estimate them. So before we get started, a little bit of an interactive piece here. Tell me what Agile means to you. The word Agile, whenever you hear Agile in your career or generally anywhere you hear Agile, what does it mean to you? Feel free to go ahead and key whatever you feel in the chat. Abin says fast delivery. Shubham says quick and fast. Vishnu says flexible. Again, there are no wrong answers. You can absolutely tell me what your thought is. It could be anything, right? You could, when someone says Agile, what instantly comes to your mind? Accurate, quick, fast and accurate. Dynamic from Sumit. Akash says fast. Quick and easy. Fast forward and flexible. Awesome, those are all great inputs. So I'm going to combine all that you've said so far along with some more inputs from my side. So Agile is not merely a methodology, right? It's a mindset. So in my over the decade of coaching experience, this is something I've consistently learned, I've consistently coached, that it's not just a methodology. You should start seeing it more like a mindset. It's basically a culture that we implement across the company. So it's like a complete mind shift from the traditional way we had been delivering products all along, right? So whenever I say mindset, what I'm trying to say here is it's a mind shift wherein we welcome different perspectives and diversity of thoughts and ideas. So it's not like a one way. We are welcoming everybody to the room. Everyone's skill set is valued. Everyone's expertise is valued. We welcome everybody's thoughts and ideas, and we actually become better as a team, right? So another thing that what mindset means is we learn from our past mistakes and we try to improve. So all of us makes mistakes through the time, right? All of us learn from our mistakes. So it's very important to take the mistakes, convert them to opportunities, and then improve through the, your product delivery as well. Also, we learn to accept changes and adapt quickly. I can't really think of more relevant scenario that we are in today, right? So we have been in this pandemic for more than a year now, and things have changed. The way the business are done are changed. The way communication collaborations happen have changed. Even the way we are doing events like this have changed, right? We have switched more into a virtual platform. So change is the only constant. Changes keep happening, right? We need to accept those changes and adapt to them quickly. The sooner we adapt, it's easier for us to succeed as well. Also, with the agile mindset, our teams are transparent. So be it success or failures, we talk about it, we're transparent about it. We communicate, we collaborate, and we become better as a team, right? And then in agile, you keep hearing this term as well, that teams are self-managing. So what does self-managing means? Self-managing means the teams are not order takers. So nobody comes and tells us like, hey, Sudha, you go and do this user story. You need to develop this, right? Rather, what happens is we have a cross-functional team, meaning we have different skill sets in one team, right? One could be best in development, one person could be best in integration, one person could be best in configuration, while totally another person could be best in validating scenarios more from a quality assurance perspective, right? So we have different kinds of skill sets in one team. And sorry, if you're not talking, can you please go on mute? Thank you. So what we're trying to do is we create a self-accountability and self-managing teams where the teams, we ourselves know what work is best suited for us. I mean, my expertise could be used in one user story more, while if I'm not great at integration, you giving me an integration user story is not going to really go well around, right? I'm most likely going to go far, right? So it's a self-managing team where we pick up what we want to do and how we want to do. So this is also a very important concept of agile. So in our teams continuously communicate, collaborate, and share knowledge freely. So there is a mutual trust in the team. There's a mutual respect in the team. We all trust each other. So it's very easy for us to communicate, share ideas with each other, collaborate, and we are even okay to share knowledge freely, like how we are sharing knowledge with different Salesforce communities today, right? So it's very important that if we know something, we let others know as well. And another very important aspect, again, I can't reiterate this more because it's very important. The teams are very happy and they're having fun at work. So all of us wants to get up, the next day and want to look forward to going to work, look forward to working with the team, right? What if we don't have like, good environment at work, or we're not a very happy person because we're not really looking forward to go to the work the next day. It's going to affect the productivity. It's going to affect our morale. It's going to affect how we communicate and collaborate as well. Basically, we may even stop trusting our team if you're not being very happy. So it's very important that, the teams are happy and having fun at work and outside. And eventually our customers are going to be happy. So with these kind of mind shift, the going towards the agile mindset, the benefits that we get are we are able to deliver high business value incrementally sooner and faster with higher quality and a safer delivery, right? So when I say safe delivery, I mean you're delivering products smoothly without bigger shocks in production. There is no shock to the customer because we broke something in the production environment, or there is no shock to us because we're going to work overnight to fix whatever we are breaking, right? So we're trying to give a safer delivery. We're able to innovate as we progress and deliver satisfactory products, incorporating consistent feedbacks. So innovation is a key for any product success. So nobody knows upfront that, I exactly want this and this will not change down the line for 6 months. Things change, businesses change, the processes change. How do we want to sell changes? Everything changes, right? It's not like nothing is really constant and there for a long time. So it's very important we are having the ability to innovate as we progress, and we're also able to incorporate consistent feedbacks. And like I mentioned, I want to reiterate, it's very important for all this process, the teams are happy and eventually the customers will be happy. So now moving on, I just wanted to talk about when do we use waterfall and when do we use agile, right? So there is no one size fits all. So if someone comes and tells you, hey, let's go agile, it doesn't mean because a competitor is doing it or the person wants to, just go into agile simply because the company feels that it's the buzzword, my competitors are using it, everybody is taking the agile path, why not me, right? So there is no one size fits all. So whatever might fit my need might not fit yours. So still, the traditional waterfall methodology can be a good fit for some programs. So we cannot say that only agile works for every program. Waterfall can also be used for some program. Again, it depends on the different parameters and conditions that the company and the program functions in. I'm going to give a little bit of an example here, completely out of the IT world. Let's take a very simple example of renovating a kitchen. And let us see when do we go ahead and adopt waterfall for renovating our kitchen, and when do we take the agile path. Right? Say I exactly know which appliances I need. Like I know my brand, I know the dimensions of my appliances, the pattern, and I've already decided the colors of my cabinet, my cooktop, my shelves, my wall. So my entire kitchen, whatever I need, I'm very clear of, right? And if my budget is fixed, now what you're seeing is the work is predictable and the outcome is already known, right? So if I'm asking you to renovate my kitchen, I tell you exactly I need this LG appliance for my refrigerator, I need this in a different brand, whatever. I give you everything, your outcome is very clear and the work is very predictable, right? Say I have received an estimate from a renovation company and they tell me that it might take 3 months to complete my renovation of kitchens. And I'm perfectly fine not using my kitchen for 3 months, right? So then this scenario typically fits in waterfall. It operates in phases, right? We have a requirements, we have a design phase, implementation, verification, deployment, and maintenance. Like these are the different phases we have in waterfall, right? So at the end of the requirements phase, what happens is the requirements gets locked. At the end of design phase, design gets locked, and so on, right? So changes to them cannot be easily made or incorporated after being signed off. So usually there's a sign-off process after end of each phase, and we really cannot incorporate changes in the middle of that. So there's a very limited room for innovations and feedback here. Say, let's really think of a very happy path, right? Say, because I already knew my outcome, already I exactly knew how my kitchen I wanted it, right? Because it was very clear, I might be actually at the end of the 3 months very happy with the outcome, right? I might be very happy with the way my kitchen has turned out. Or there's another possibility. Say after 3 months, if I'm not happy with an appliance or a color, it is really hard for me to change, right? And then there could be extra time and budget that will be needed to be kept aside. They might close my kitchen for some more time. I might not be able to use it. So it might leave me a little disappointed. But let's just think of a happy path. Knowing all our parameters, everything we know, I exactly want what I wanted. I'm going to be very happy at the end of it. So when do we use, or take the agile path for renovating a kitchen? Say I want to renovate my kitchen, iterate it. I do not want to wait for 3 months, and I really want to start using it as soon as a part of it is built. And my MVP is clear, right? My minimum viable product. What's the bare minimum I need to start functioning, right? So my MVP is very clear. I also want to provide consistent feedback and want to innovate as things are getting built. Because I am a person who wants to innovate and use my learning as my kitchen is being built. So I'm very much looking forward to it. For instance, say I want my cooktop with the chimney to be ready first so that I can start cooking. Then I want my refrigerator so that I can store my vegetables and milk. The next critical item for me is my sink and my slab, followed by my cabinet and my shelves. So my MVP is kind of very clear. I want to start cooking first, so I want my cooktop and chimney. And while I start cooking, I notice that I may need a longer slab. I feel my work area in the kitchen is less. I might need a longer slab. I can always incorporate it in Agile, right? If I feel like I would love a nice wallpaper on my kitchen, which might make it more beautiful, I can always ask my designer to add it to the list of items he's going to deliver. So through Agile, if you've noticed, we can accommodate new ideas and learnings, which will certainly make me very happy with the end result. And definitely not to forget, I get to use my kitchen through this process as and when an item is ready. I really don't have to wait for the full complete, 3 months or 5 months or whatever my renovation company is asking me to. So moving on, we have heard about different approaches and frameworks in Agile, right? So they are all built based on the Agile values and principles, which has been set out in the Agile Manifesto. So we have heard about Scrum, extreme programming. You would have heard about Crystal method. You would have heard about SAFe, a lot of these, right? Again, there is no one size fits all. So we get to choose these frameworks based on many factors. Very similarly, how we said we should choose Waterfall or Agile. We need to validate different parameters in our conditions and then pick the framework which is best suited for that. So in today's session, we'll primarily focus on the most successful and the widely used framework, Scrum. We're going to pretty much stick to Scrum till the end of the session. We are not going to look at any other frameworks during this session. So just to give you a little bit of background. So Scrum was founded on empiricism and lean thinking. So what empiricism means is we believe that knowledge comes from experience and we make decisions based on what we observe, right? Whatever has happened to us in the past, we try to inspect and adapt through that. That's what we're trying to do. Lean thinking means it eliminates waste and focus on what is important. So these were the two founding principles on how the Scrum came into existence. So Scrum is actually a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate values through adaptive solutions for complex problems. So what Scrum does is it employs an iterative and incremental approach. So basically, we're trying to optimize predictability and control risks through using this particular framework. It emphasizes on transparency in communication. So like you mentioned, it's one of the core values that we want our teams to be transparent. We want everyone to communicate with each other. So be it success, be it failure, it doesn't matter. We just work together, we learn from our mistakes, and we just become better and better as a team, right? So we're trying to create an environment of collective accountability and continuous progress. So we want to make continuous progress through all the iteration, the different sprints we are going to take, and we want to become better and better, and we want to achieve our product goal, right? It's very important that our teams take collective accountability. We're all self-managing and don't be order takers. It actually engages a group of people who collectively have all skills and expertise to do the work, and they're also willing to share or acquire such skills. Like I mentioned, we have different skill sets, right? Someone who is best at coding, someone who's best at config, someone who's best at testing or integration and whatnot. So it's a room full of, the team consists of different skill sets with different expertise and people sitting together to achieve the product goal. So 3 pillars of the Scrum you would have heard pretty often. They are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So these 3 we will keep keeping in mind, and as you go through this session, you will know why these 3 are the pillars of Scrum and why it's so important for the success of any programs. So the success of the Scrum depends on people becoming more proficient in living its 5 values. So in my slide here, I've talked about 5 values of Scrum, right? So the first one is commitment. So when I say commitment, what are we committing to? We're committing to achieve goals and support each other as a team. So that is, each of us in the Scrum team are going to commit to each other this, that we will together achieve our goals and we will support each other. The next one is focus. So all of us are going to focus on the work of the sprint and make the best possible progress we can. The third is openness. We're going to be open about work and any challenges we face to accomplish that work. The next one is respect. Again, it's very important that we share mutual respect for each other, because without trust and respect, it's very hard to be transparent and communicate and collaborate. The final one is courage. So we need to have a courage to do the right thing and work on tough problems. So if you have to say no, if you have to push back and so on something, you need to have courage to do so. So, all right. Now that we know a little bit, theory around how Scrum came into picture, how the values and pillars of Scrum work, let us see who are part of the Scrum squad. And I want to hear from you. Whom do you think are part of the Scrum team? Whom all you think are the main people behind the Scrum team? If you know any roles, you can put that in the chat here, or if you feel you want to share some skill sets, you could do that too. But let me know what you feel are, comprises the Scrum squad. Scrum Master, yes. Developers, architects. Product owner, perfect. Analyst, Okay, Sahil, I am assuming it's a question. Product owner, Scrum Master, product owner, BA, developers, QA support, testers, QA, UAT, Scrum Master, developer, architect, and product owner. Awesome, you're all making my life much easier because you're already pretty good at the basics. So let me walk you through each core part of the Scrum squad. So the Scrum team comprises of a product owner, a Scrum Master, and the developers, right? So typically a team of 10 or fewer, they work towards the common product goal. So I just wanted to talk through each of these roles and give you a little bit brief about what they're responsible for. So the product owner is primarily responsible for product backlog and prioritization. So I'm going to take a step back here and talk to you about what a product backlog is. So when we capture requirements, right? So whether you're in Waterfall or whether you're in Agile, what we're trying to do is we want to understand the vision of our customer. We want to understand the goal which they're trying to achieve. And then in order to achieve the goal, we need to have a set of requirements in simple terms, right? So what are the stories that they're trying to achieve? So product backlog is nothing but a collection of all these requirements. And we do it in like a different formats, right? So we have something called as an epic, which is like a very high level requirement. Say, for example, I'm a product owner, I'm talking to my customer, asking, why are we doing this program? What is the value that you're trying to get out of this program? What is very important for you? What's your vision from this program, right? If my customer, he or she comes back and tell me, hey, Sudha, I want to look at, customer service optimization, right? That's so vague, right? It's like very high level. So, but we start there. We have to start at some point and get more information. So I make an epic saying it is customer service optimization. It's one of the bigger goals which the customer wants, right? So then what I do, I start talking more to the customer to understand the need better, right? So then as we brainstorm it together, we understand that for the customer service optimization, case management is one of the features that we're looking for. And then say, for example, they want to build a knowledge base or like FAQs or something that's easy to get answers from. And say another piece is to collaborate with the different service agents, right? So these are the different pieces that they want to deliver as part of the bigger epic. And these become my features. Okay, let's pick one feature now. Now I start talking more to my customer about case management, right? So we start discussing, I try to understand what the need of the customer is. So the customer tells me, like, hey, I want to be able to create cases in Salesforce. So I want my service agents, if somebody calls the call center, I want the service agent to create a case on their behalf, right? And so what I do, one of my user story is going to be for creating cases, right? For the service agent. So that will become one of my user stories. So if there is any new fields to be added to that case page layout, then I'm going to create more user stories for that. If there is more process involved, I'm going to split them and create individual user stories. So user stories are your smallest or the granular level of requirements, which adds business value. And this is what we are going to focus on delivering sprint after sprint, right? So only if a bunch of user stories under a feature gets done, the feature is progressing, right? So that's one of the very important responsibility of the product owner. So he or she owns the product backlog and then also takes responsibility for prioritizing the product backlog, because you might have 300, 400 user stories. So which is utmost priority for the customer, which adds more business value. So that prioritization needs to happen. Otherwise, we might be delivering very low value items sooner and high value items later. That's not going to make any good for the customer or for us, right? And the product owner ensures the team understands the product backlog items. So when I say product backlog items, I mean whether it's epic or the feature or the user stories, they're all product backlog items, right? So as a product owner, I need to understand everybody in my team exactly is clear of what I'm expecting out of this particular story, right? What the customer is value that the customer is trying to generate to this particular user story. So all the clarifications needs to happen. If there are more questions, I need to ensure I clarify all the questions for my team to build this. Through this, product owner becomes primarily responsible for maximizing the value of the product itself. So let's move on, right? So the next important Scrum role or the Scrum squad is a Scrum Master, whom is also called as a true leader, right? Typically the role of Nick Fury in Avengers, if you are an Avengers fan. So he or she serves Scrum team and the larger organization. So Scrum Master ensures the Scrum is adopted well. Like if you're new to your team and you don't really know what Scrum is, your go-to person is Scrum Master for anything with related to how Scrum framework works. If there are any questions that you're not sure of, then you can go and put your Scrum Master and get information from. Scrum Master is also a Scrum coach or the mentor to the team. He or she facilitates all ceremonies. So when I say Scrum ceremonies, these are the Scrum events like your sprint planning, your daily stand-up, your sprint review or retrospective. That's what we call as ceremonies, right? And Scrum Master is one of the very important responsibilities. He or she removes impediments for delivering the committed products. So if you're facing any risk, if you're facing some hurdle in the way you're building things, you feel like, hey, there is a risk involved, I have an impediment, your go-to person again is a Scrum Master. The final piece which plugs into the Scrum team is the developers. So when I say developers, I want you all to remember it doesn't mean the person is coding or configuring. Don't confuse it with the developer terminology generally that goes on. So when I say developers, these are product developers. So they are responsible for the end-to-end product development, right? So do not think it only involves, a particular skill set and something else is excluded. So like I mentioned earlier, they are cross-functional team. They have different skill sets and they are self-managing. So, the team chooses who will work on what, how, and what to work on, right? They have enough information and knowledge to perform the work. And they are primarily responsible for delivering potentially shippable increments of done product at end of each sprint. So at end of each sprint, you're delivering some value to your customers, right? And there's something that we call as a definition of done, right? It's like your imagine it like your book where you have a set of conditions and you're trying to say only if this are like satisfied, I can say my story is done. For instance, if you have a heavy customization, like trying to check your code coverage, trying to check your test classes, having peer reviews done on your code or config, whatever you're doing, all that could be part of your definition of done. Like for instance, demoing the stories to your product owner and getting a sign off could be part of your definition of done. All tests being passed and there is nothing goes without defect, goes with defects to your production, right? That is also part of your definition of done. So all this means when I say done product, it means a user story which is fully complete and also satisfies the definition of done. So moving on, I wanted to give a quick brief which gives you an overall understanding of the end-to-end Scrum framework. So like I mentioned, it all starts with your product owner going and talking to the executive team or stakeholders and understand the vision of the program, what they're trying to achieve for the product, what's really their problem statements, and what is the problem they are facing, and what is the the vision and the requirements that they have, right? So all this the product owner captures in the product backlog, and they all become your product backlog item. So this is where our commitment of product goal comes into play. So that's what we are trying to commit to, right? We are understanding the goal from the customer for the product, and we're trying to capture them in the form of stories or features or epics, right? And what happens, continuously, and this happens across sprints, it's an exercise called backlog grooming. So backlog grooming is an event where the product owner tries to explain each of the product backlog item to the team so that they have enough understanding of the stories earlier itself. So you're not going to pick a story and groom it today and build it tomorrow, right? You're doing this, it's an ongoing process. You keep grooming your backlog, you keep making your backlog better and better. So the development team will come and ask any questions that they have. If they have enough information of the user stories, then they're fine with it. And then they estimate the user stories. And I'm going to talk about estimation of user stories later in the session. So the next thing, and before we move on, I want to take a pause and talk a little bit about the term sprint itself, because you will keep hearing about sprint when I talk about sprint planning, when I talk about sprint review or retrospective. So sprints are actually the heartbeat of Scrum. So ideas are turned into value through sprints, right? It's a time-boxed iteration of a continuous development cycle. So they're usually arranged somewhere between 1 to 4 weeks. And at the end of each sprint, an increment or multiple increments get created. So when I say increment, I mean the done products which are potentially shippable items, which we talked earlier, right? So a set of user stories you're trying to deliver as part of the sprint, if I have to put that in a very simple term. So say, for example, your sprint is starting. So we talk about sprint planning. So that's one of our first event that happens. Sprint planning initiates the sprints by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint itself, right? So this plan is generally created by a collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. So it potentially addresses three questions. So first one will be like, why is a sprint valuable? So first of all, why are we doing the sprint? Why can't we go without it, right? Why do we even have a sprint? So when we talk through this question, the answer we get is a sprint goal. So we talk about what value we are trying to deliver to the customer as part of this sprint, and that becomes your sprint goal. The second question we'll try to address is what can be done this sprint, right? So for this question, what we do is our development team selects items to include in the current sprint. So you have a list of product backlog items, and then they are all prioritized, and you would have estimated already, right? Because this product backlog keeps happening, grooming keeps happening. So you already would have had estimated some stories, and they are also prioritized backlog. So it's probably the first few items, right? So the development team selects items to include in the current sprint. So there are a few parameters. I'm not going to go through the details of it in this session. I have included it in a blog and the website. Please do check out if you have time. But just to give you a bit of a background for the benefit of time. So we consider a few things like the velocity of the team. So basically how much you have in the historical past, the same team, how much we were able to achieve, right? Then we also look at something called as a capacity. So some people will have vacation plans, it could be holidays in the middle of the sprint. So the capacity, the number of hours the team can put together for the sprint, all that are taken into considerations. And then the team starts picking up stories and adding to the sprint backlog. So the commitment here that happens at the end of this meeting is a sprint goal. So we try to know, okay, I have a bigger product goal, but from this sprint, I'm trying to achieve this smaller sprint goal, right? So that's what happens at the end of sprint plan. So next one is the daily scrum or the daily stand-up. People use this term interchangeably, but yeah, it's daily stand-up or daily scrum means the same. So it is to inspect progress towards the sprint goal. So now we've already committed to a sprint goal, the sprint planning. Now we try to inspect our progress towards it and to produce an actionable plan for the next 24 hours, right? It is not the status meeting. And this is a common misconception. I've seen several teams do this. Don't make it like a status meeting where one person goes and asks, hey, Sudha, what did you do yesterday? Tell me, what are you doing? What going to work on today? It shouldn't be like, again, we're not order takers. Let people talk for themselves. Let the teams be self-managing, right? So the daily Scrum actually helps promote self-managing teams, which is again the heart of agility and Scrum, right? So we determine how to create the done implement. So we own the backlog itself, the sprint backlog, right? The aim is to inspect and adapt the sprint backlog together. So the main agenda or the main reason why we have a daily stand-up kind of a ceremony itself is to improve communication, transparency between the team and identify impediment and promote a quick decision making. So generally, like if you have any impediments, it's a right meeting to go and voice it out, saying, hey, I'm trying to work on this particular user story. I have this risk. This person from the integration team is either out of office or out on an emergency. I'm actually getting delayed. I need to have a better plan because there is a risk in delivering this user story. Such kind of impediments are better to be called out in the daily stand-up. But again, do not stick and wait to the daily stand-up to voice out the impediments. Always remember time is of essence. So if you find an impediment, go ahead and ask your Scrum Master, talk to the Scrum Master as quickly as you can. Don't wait 24 hours for the next stand-up to even talk about it, because you would have wasted 24 hours by then, right? So if it's something that you know, talk about it quickly. All right, so through the sprint, again, our commitment here is going to be the definition of done. So we are going to ensure we are delivering products and that comply the definition of done. So the next ceremony is a sprint review. So the purpose of the sprint review is to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine future adaptations. So what we do here is the Scrum team usually presents the result of your work to your key stakeholders and progress towards the product goal. So a lot of people do demonstrations. So as and when you build a story, you are able to demonstrate it to your customer and get their feedback, right? So again, though there are sprint reviews, in some of my programs, what I have also done is we've really not waited for the sprint review to demonstrate. If we have some logical user stories and the stakeholder is the same, and if they have time, we go and demonstrate it as quickly as we build it, because then you're able to get feedback faster and there is enough time to incorporate feedback as well, right? But if not, if your stakeholders are very busy and all that they have time is for the sprint review, then this is the time you get to demonstrate all your user stories to your customers, get a review from them, and gather their feedback. So by this time, you already have a finished work. You already have your increment, right? So finally, there is another interesting event that we do. It's a sprint retrospective. So the purpose of the sprint retrospective is to plan ways to increase the quality and effectiveness for us as a team, right? So we inspect how the last sprint went with regards to, like, be it individuals, be it your team or an integration team, with regards to the tools, if you're using Jira, TFS, or whatever to manage your work, how your experience was with that, the process, any interactions, and even a definition of done, right? Sometimes you'll have to change it. You would have left some important thing in the definition of done, and that's actually pinching your mouth. So they discuss usually what went well, what could have gone better, and how they solved it. Sometimes you would have solved it, sometimes you wouldn't have solved your problem. So we try to discuss all of that. And the improvements are identified and we try to address them as soon as possible. All right, so now we looked at a bit of the Scrum introduction, roles, and the ceremonies. I wanted to talk a little bit about a tale. It's a real tale which happened. So when Salesforce met Agile. I'm not sure really how many of you know this story. Some of this is also available in Trailhead and also was discussed in Dreamforce earlier. So just to give you a bit of a background. So imagine as we're heading to a Dreamforce and there are no new keynotes, okay? And then there is no new product announcements and no innovation features available for the next year. It's really scary when we think about it now, right? But this almost happened to Salesforce in 2006. But they dodged that scenario by implementing a new workflow that changed the way they developed and delivered products. So what happened is by 2006, Salesforce had experienced phenomenal growth. They had more customers, more products, more revenue, much bigger company when they compared to when they started in 1999, right? So, and any growth doesn't come pain-free. Things were not easier anymore. There was slowdown in innovation. Even scaling communication, collaborations, and managing things, all while they were trying to meet the release dates, became very challenging. So that is when they took the risk and reinvented a way of delivering solution by adopting agile principles and practices. Most of the work Salesforce does is innovation based, which we all know, right? We never know the outcome upfront, right? The final outcome is always not clearly known immediately. And agile works like a charm for most of these teams. Like I mentioned earlier, no one size fits all. Salesforce still has some teams working on Waterfall where outcomes are clearly known upfront. So like I mentioned, look at the parameters and only then the customers decide whether they should take the Waterfall or the Agile path. And when they actually adopted Agile, Salesforce had 150 people organized into smaller cross-functional teams working in shorter iteration. I just thought this is really a story when Salesforce met Agile, and I wanted to quickly share it with you all. All right, so now let's get into more specifics with regards to Salesforce. How do you create good user stories? You may not be a product owner currently in your role, but it's still very important to understand how to create good stories, because it's really important to understand what a user story is and what comprises a good user story. So a good user story falls into something called as an invest criteria. So if you remember invest criteria while you're writing your user stories, you're most likely going to be on a good path, right? So what does invest mean? So invest acronym stands for, the I stands for independent. So when I say independent, what I mean is the story should be independent as far as possible. Don't create stories which are too much dependent on each other, because what might happen is you will not be able to deliver the value sooner and faster, right? We're trying to deliver value sooner and faster in Agile. And what happens when you create too much dependencies is your user story 3 can only be built if 1 and 2 are done. So that means even if 3 is of high business value, you're dependent on 2 other stories. So try to keep them as independent as possible. N in invest stands for negotiable. So what I mean by negotiable is story should be always, there should be room for discussion, right? It should never be a dead end. There should always be a space for negotiation on user stories. So if you are not able to discuss a user story, if you're not able to have a conversation on it, then it's actually an alarm, right? Maybe it's not a good user story at all, because there should always be a room for discussion and innovation in a story. So the V in invest stands for valuable. So I kept saying this word through the session so far, right? All that we are trying to do, the main objective is we're trying to create business value for the customer, right? So ensure whatever is there as a product pack or item, especially your user stories, are adding value to the customer. If something is totally not valuable, it should really not be in your product backlog itself. E in the invest stands for estimable. So ensure the stories that we create, the team is able to go understand the details of it, estimate the user stories. And even after you estimate the stories, when you pick it up during the sprint, we do an exercise called task estimation to really know how many hours we need to finish this particular story, right? So they should be able to break the stories into different tasks and estimate that as well. If you create a user story that cannot be estimated, it's really alarming as well. So the S in invest stands for small. So like I mentioned, keep your user stories as small as possible, because again, our goal is to create values sooner and faster. So we don't want to create larger user stories and keep waiting to build it, right? That's not the purpose here. So T in the invest stands for testable. So we should always be able to test our user stories against the acceptance criteria that we have created. So it's very important that our user stories can be tested, because if you can't test it, how are we even going to validate if it's working fine, right? So ensure, even though, like I mentioned, you may not be the product owner, but you need to understand this very clearly, because whatever role you're playing right now in your team, the heartbeat of the product itself is a user story, because that's what you're trying to build and deliver value. So it's very important to know how a good user story looks like and how it should be created. So user story potentially has three parts. Again, I'm saying user story, but it's kind of valid even for features or epics. So any product backlog item, right? But we keep using this more in the user story because at the granular level, we are using it much more than at the feature and the epic level. But again, like I mentioned, it's applicable for features as well. So there's a summary, which typically is your user story or a feature name. Then there's a description, which is your value statement. And finally is your acceptance criteria. So summary is usually a crisp statement, right? So what you put in summary is to distinguish your story from another story. That's all. You're not trying to, nobody's going to create test case testing based on your user story summary. Imagine it like to be a name, and when you look at it, you should be able to distinguish this story from another story. A tip that I use is I keep the feature name shortened, and then I usually have a small story summary as well, right? So I'm going to give you a bit of an example to understand with a Salesforce use case. Say I'm working with a financial services client, and there is a need that they want to actually know the account levels of their customers. So the relationship levels, right? We all have this platinum, bronze, gold, silver. We have different categories. So they want the ability to have their accounts have a level mentioned against them. So this is a use case, right? So the customer tells me and I start to create a user story. So how do I put a summary for this? Say, for example, I already have an account management feature, right? I'm going to use my tip here and I'm going to say, like, within square brackets, I'm going to put my feature name shortened. Say ACCP, MGMT. Or if you want, you can put account management itself. But again, I prefer it shortened because it's just to identify. So don't keep it too long. And then I could say my story summary is ability to capture account levels, because what I'm trying to solve for the customer is to capture the account levels. So that becomes my summary. So simply account management hyphen ability to capture account levels. So easily I can distinguish this story from another story. Then the crux of the user story again is a description, because your value statement of the story gets in right here. So the description usually has three potential parts, right? These are three essential parts. It's very important your user story contains these three. One is the persona. So you always see your user story start like as a, and then you talk about the user, the persona itself, right? And then we talk about the action. So I want to, what is the action you're trying to perform? The what part of your value statement? And finally, we talk about the benefit to the customer. The why are we even doing this story? What is the benefit? So that the benefit, right? I'm going to again take the same use case and tell you how we could write a story description. For example, I could say as an account executive is my persona. Remember not to use Salesforce user as a persona. It's again a commonly done mistake and something that we should avoid, because a Salesforce user could mean a marketing executive to me, sales executive to someone else, a sales rep to someone else, and something with anybody. Anybody can think anything else, right? Because anybody in Salesforce is Salesforce user. Whom are we building this user story for? So ensure you put a specific role. So like for our example, I'm going to say as an account executive, I want the ability to capture the level which my account belongs to. So that's my action. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to capture account levels so that the benefit is I can understand the relationship level with my customer, right? And then I could add some essential pieces like, like I told you, I have platinum, silver, bronze, gold. Then that becomes my value. I can add that to my description as well. Remember, keep it simple and concise. Don't add too much details which is not relevant to your user story. Focus only on what is important. Don't keep adding too much details which may not add value to the story. Finally, is the acceptance criteria. So this section of the user story is where we put the set of conditions to be fulfilled. So if in order to say this user story is ready, what are the conditions that we need to be fulfilled, right? So these are the testable statements. Again, a tip from me, from my experiences, keep around 3 to 5 acceptance criteria for a story. If it becomes more, probably you need to rethink if your story is big, and it might actually need to be broken into multiple smaller stories, because it might actually be becoming bulkier if you're adding more than 5 acceptance criteria, right? So it again, very similar to the description, has 3 parts. There is an given condition, which is like your initial condition. And then we are trying to talk about the action in the when condition and then the result to be obtained. Again, I'm going to give you an example with our use case, right? Given that I am an account executive, so I'm the person who is going to test this and say, yeah, given I'm an account executive, when I click on, when I view my accounts, I should be able to see the account levels related to my customer, right? So this becomes, so what is the given condition that I'm account executive? What is the action I'm trying to perform? I am trying to view account levels on my account. The result obtained is I should be able to see the account levels. And you can again add the values here. I should be able to see like platinum, silver, gold, and bronze. And I could have multiple acceptance criteria, one to view and other to update, right? I should also be able to update. Someone who's silver today could become platinum tomorrow. I want the ability to update that as well. So I can add an acceptance criteria for that. So when I given that I'm an account executive, when I try to update the account levels on my account, I should be able to do that. Similarly, if there is another condition, for example, let's make it a little bit more, add more complexity to this. Say I want the ability only for my accounts. I do not want it for anybody else's account. Then that could also become an acceptance criteria, right? Given that I'm an account executive and not the owner of the account, then I should not be able to update my account levels of the account that I'm looking at, right? So these are your testable statements. So if you understand, for this one use case, we are adding different values to different sections. So summary is to distinguish, description, the actual value statement, and the testable statements goes into the acceptance criteria. All right, so now a little bit of interactive piece here. Based on what I have described so far, what key details would you include in description of a story if your story is about capturing some new information? Say your customer wants to capture a new information in a particular screen. So what are the details from a Salesforce perspective that you would look for additional to your as the persona, what and why? What are the things that you would look for when the story is about a new information capture? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Again, there are no wrong answers. I want to hear all your different perspectives. All right, I'm not seeing any response. Yeah, I saw one. Data type, size, relationship. Awesome, Manu. Thank you for that. Anything else? What would you be looking for? You're trying to capture some new information, right? So as the development team, we need to have some additional information. So imagine you're grooming the story with your product owner. What are the few things that you would ask the product owner for the description? Awesome. Who is it for? Brilliant. What is the use of the new field? Excellent. The relationship. Right? Anything more that you can think of? Target area. To whom we need to provide access. Awesome. Cool. So just to summarize most of what you said and a little bit from my side. So for instance, we need to capture a new information on a particular screen, like say we are adding a case status or in case page, right? Or something else. What we might look for is, we want to know the field label, right? What are you going to call this field as in the page? What is the type of the field, like you rightly mentioned, right? Should it be a pickler? Should it be a text field? Should it be a formula field and whatnot, right? The field position, where do you really want to put this field on the page, right? Which section is appropriate for it? Like someone rightly mentioned, who is it for and what do we really need this field for, right? And we'll also look for information like which screens, which page layouts we need to do this. Is it going to be a required field? Should it be a read-only field or an editable field? The typical FLS that you will field level security that you will be information you will be looking for. If it's a little bit more complex scenario, in which case we'll break the story down, is sometimes your data will come from a different system, right? The source of the particular field, the data is going to be some other system. Or we might be sending data from Salesforce to a different system after we capture it. So in such cases, the story gets broken down into another story because the objective is different. We are passing information and that information will be captured there. So awesome. Now let's look at another scenario. Imagine a story is about a business process or like a workflow, right? A customer workflow. So then what are the informations that you would look for in description of the user story? Go ahead and let me know what you feel in the chat. So this is about a business process. We're trying to build a business process for the customer. So that's the value that we're trying to realize. Imagine it to be like a workflow, and what kind of information that you would look for as part of your user story. What is the criteria? Thank you, Sai Kumar. Criteria and action, how to automate it, what are the criteria action types, should it be used? Thank you, Swapna. Anything more? Manu says security involved. Role criteria. Awesome. Yeah, pretty much based on what you told me and a little bit more to add. Generally, if it's about a business process or a workflow, we would look for the success pattern, the failure pattern, any exceptions, and how do we do the exception handling? What actually triggers the process or the workflow itself, right? What scenario does that? When this workflow itself should be triggered? The actions that might be needed, right? And like if it's a bigger flow, then we again break them down into smaller stories. Awesome. Thank you all for great inputs. Let's do one more. Tell me, what is the kind of information that you would look for if it's an approval process? Imagine the story is about an approval process, and tell me what kind of details you would look for in such a user story. What does the business need? Thanks, Sapna. Anything that you would look for in an approval process kind of a story. Approval actions, when should be a process should be approved. rejected or pending. Thank you, Swapna. What type of approval process is it? Single step or multi-step? Excellent. For whom we need to take approval? Thanks, Abhinav. Sahil says it is negotiable. Let's check. Manu says who is approver? Initialization of approval. What if the approval is rejected or pending? Awesome. Excellent, right? That pretty much you all covered it. Thank you so much for your participation. So in an approval process kind of a story, we look for all scenarios that triggers the approval process. How is it expected to work? Like you all mentioned, right? The approvers and the levels of approval. Is it like a one-level approval? Is it a multi-level approval? How are they even being notified? So if something has to be approved, how are they going to be notified? Is it going to be email? Is it going to be internally in Salesforce? How are we going to do this? What is the SLA for approval, right? Are we going to wait forever, or are we going to put some auto approval after some point? So like you also mentioned, the rejection scenarios, and those also need to be covered. And one thing to keep in mind, if there is more information in this particular user story, see if you can logically break them down into smaller stories. Awesome, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for all your inputs. And here I want to quickly, before we move on with the user story creation and go to the next one, I want to give you a quick example of a user story, like a full user story, right? So if your use case is about capturing regions on opportunities, typically the summary, I'm assuming my feature is going to be sales process. So it's going to be like a sales process. Like I mentioned, I used my own tip. I put them in a square bracket. And then I'm saying capture region on opportunity. So that's my user story summary. And then I have a description where I clearly say what my persona is as a sales rep. I want the ability to capture region of my opportunities, which is my action, so that I can view and manage my opportunities by region. So that's the value or the benefit I'm getting through this story. And since I'm talking about the regions here, I'm also mentioning what kind of values that I need, like EMEA, North America, LATAM, and APAC. And then I have two acceptance criteria here, assuming this is just a very simple, straightforward story. Given that I'm a sales representative, when I view my opportunities, I should be able to see the region to which the opportunity belongs to. Similarly, I have one for updating as well. Given that I'm a sales rep, when I edit my opportunities, I should be able to update the region, right? So typically, these are the testable statements which are part of my user stories. So now that we know how to create good user stories, let's quickly work on how we prioritize them. Right? It's again something that the product owner does along with the stakeholders, but it's very important for all of us to know how do we prioritize user story, how the prioritization process itself happens. So this is what is very important for arriving at MVP. So you will keep hearing about MVP. It's not the Salesforce MVP I'm talking about, but about the minimum viable product that you will be keeping on hearing in your program, Salesforce programs, right? So what is the minimal thing I need to add value to my customer, right? So that is your MVP. So how do you arrive at that? We use something called as a Moscow analysis. So what it stands for is must have, should have, could have, or won't have. So what we try to do is we pick each of the product backlog item and then we see which bucket it falls into. So how do we do that, right? Everything has value, everything might be important. So how do we go about doing this? We have few key considerations to take care of, right? So the first and foremost is the business value. So like I kept mentioning through this session, you're trying to add business value to the customer, right? So see if this has high business value or low business value or like medium business value, right? And then the next thing to consider is any dependency. So do we have relationship with other product backlog items? Do I need to wait for something else to be delivered for me to pick this up? So that kind of dependency is also considered. And few other things we consider is the risk and the solution approach, right? So when I say solution approach, if you have any prerequisites or dependencies that should be taken care of, this is again a real-time scenario that happened to me in one of my programs. So what happened is it was a new Salesforce implementation. They've never had Salesforce earlier, their first implementation. And they were trying to implement Service Cloud, right? So one of the first and foremost features that they wanted was case management. So they said that's their number one feature that they want to focus on, and that's what is the topmost priority for them. So while we were discussing, and the product owner did mention that, as a prerequisite, you may want to consider doing org setup first, because the customers might not really know what needs to be done from a product perspective, right? We need to educate them if something else is a solution approach prerequisite. So we actually educated the customer saying, hey, we need to do the org setup. We need to ensure our profiles, roles, everything is clearly defined. We need to ensure the basic security is taken care of. So probably we need to spend some time and effort on doing the org setup first. It may not directly translate to a business value for you like day one, like you're not able to create cases, but in order to build other features and get more value out of it, this should be implemented. So obviously the priority shifted for org setup as first, and then your case management became second, right? So now I'm going to a little bit talk about what is this must have, should have, could have, and won't have. How do you decide if a user story fits into which bucket? So say, for example, if a product backlog item is absolutely essential, right? It's of high business value. It's totally not a negotiable item. It's critical for the success of your customer. Then you should put that in the must have. Right? Say, for example, there's another user story. It is important, but it is not like absolutely essential. It's like high priority item, but it's not like you really need it right now. Then that is a should have. Say, for example, you have a user story, which is a nice to have. It has a value. It is a desirable, story that we would like to see, but it's not like I can't live without it. That means it is could have. Won't have is something which is not so important for a release, and it can be implemented later. It's totally something that I can skip for this release. It's not of value immediately to me. I can wait and implement it the next release. So then that story would get in the won't have. So these are the key considerations to keep in mind. And these are the 4 buckets that you ideally plug in your user stories into. Now, story estimation, right? So I'm going to talk about only user story estimation here. A lot of people confuse between story estimation and task estimation. So story estimation is an exercise that happens as part of your backlog grooming. So when you have enough information about your story and you're able to size it, you do story estimation. The task estimation is done later in time when you start picking up user stories for sprint planning, and then that time you do the task estimation. So these two are different things. For today's session, we are going to focus on user story estimation. So the unit of sizing, you would have pretty much heard USP being mentioned in a lot of places. People say 3 USP, 5 USP. So it stands for user story points. And the technique, which is again a most successful technique that a lot of programs follow, is something called the relative sizing. So if you ask somebody how much time you will take to build a house, and you just tell them it's a large house, it's a bungalow, how much time you would take. For them to just look at something like a picture and tell you like, this is going to take me like 2 years or whatever. Rather, if you ask them to compare relatively with something else that they've already built, it's easy to size, right? So that relative sizing is what we kind of follow in a lot of the Scrum programs. So what we do is we pick a story which our team, again, remember to pick a story which your team has built earlier. Don't pick something a completely different team built. Say, for example, I have done a field label change as part of my team. So that is the smallest ever story my team has ever built. What we have done is we just had one page layout. They had decided to label it differently. So we went and changed the label. That was the smallest story we ever did. So now what we would do is we will pick that as our base story. And then we will try to size all other user stories in relation to this user story. Because this we've already built, we really know what kind of risks or complexity it had, right? So there are few considerations again here. One, first and foremost, is the complexity. So when I say complexity, I mean the functional and the technical complexity. So how complex is my current story in relation to my field label change based story? That is one of the key considerations. The second one is the magnitude of work. So when I say magnitude of work, remember, I'm not talking about the time or the number of hours. It is the amount of effort needed. Is it a huge effort? Is it a medium effort? Is it a low effort, right? So that is what we are talking about, magnitude of work. Again, we're comparing it to our base story. The reason why I say you should not include time is that while we are grooming the story and sizing the stories, we do not know who is going to work on this particular story, right? Say, for example, I'm a junior developer. Something that might take like 4 hours for me. If Amit is a senior developer, right, he might be able to complete that in 2 hours. If Rishabh is an expert, then he might be able to complete in 1 hour because he has been in the system, he has been with the same customer for a long time, he knows in and out, he really is very familiar, then he might take that. So if you noticed, it depends on the person who's going to work on it. So that is why we do time at the task estimation, not at the story estimation. Because while estimating story, nobody knows whether I will pick it up or Amit will pick it up or Rishabh will pick it up or someone else will pick it up, right? It could be anybody. So we don't consider time when we try to do story point estimation. Just consider magnitude of work. How big an effort is it is in comparison to your field label change story? Simple, right? Then there are three other things we like to consider: risk, dependencies, and uncertainties. Sometimes we have integration teams whom we have to work with for a user story, right? Like say, for example, I am sending data to another system. Then there is a dependency and risk involved. Or if they are sending me data from a different system. If, for instance, there is any unknowns, I've never worked on this integration platform. If there is something that we do not know about the system, then we need to wait for the information to come to us so that we will be able to proceed, right? So when there are dependencies or risks involved, consider that while you estimate a user story, because you might end up waiting for that team for giving you information in order for you to proceed, right? If there's any delay from their side, it's going to affect you. And again, you do not know which sprint you're going to pick this user story for and who is going to work on this. So while you're early and estimating your user stories, it's important to consider that as well. And I've given a couple of estimation values, ranges here. So if you're at a primitive stage of your project, you will do something like a t-shirt sizing, saying like, hey, this is extra small, small, medium, large. And if you're again a little bit more mature and you're following the Fibonacci series, then you're going to give the 1, 2, 3, 5 numbers. So before we wind up, I wanted to share a quick tip on your estimating user stories. Always remember, first and foremost, very important thing is understand the user story fully. You need to really know what value you're delivering to the customer. So understand the story fully. Ask questions. Don't shy away. Always ask questions. There's nothing wrong in asking questions, right? The more information you get, you might think, hey, I may not even work on the story. Why ask questions? That's not the approach. Ask all the questions. Nobody knows who's going to pick this user story, right? You need to have all necessary information to build this and deliver to your customer. And then, like I mentioned, identify your base story. It's very important. Relatively size your other stories in the backlog. And always when you're estimating, reach consensus among team. If someone says 3 story points, someone says 5, and someone says 8, don't go with the lowest or highest or the average of the number. Instead, talk to, all of you voice out why you said it is 3 or 5 or 8, right? Because we have different perspective. I would have a different expertise over you. So I might say like 3, but I wouldn't have thought through something else you had thought through. So when you tell me why you get 5 and what was the risk or additional effort you thought was involved, when you explain, I might understand and I might want to resize this and say it is 5, right? So always try to communicate and collaborate. So when you initially size, you size it individually, like independently. You are not talking to anybody. You just have enough information. You say I this 3, 5, 8. And once everyone is done with the sizing and you all reveal your sizing points, if it is different, please talk to, ask everybody to voice their opinion and say why the person felt so and so has so and so story points. And then share the different perspective and then come to a consensus. Again, a tip from my experience, for user story is bigger. If it's beyond 8 story points, you may want to break it down into smaller user stories so you can deliver business value sooner and faster. A little bit of a visual here to just make you visualize how the stories could be bigger and bigger, right? So if your field label change is your smallest story, a field creation in Salesforce could be slightly bigger story, right? If your field creations involves integration with another system, it could be even bigger. A multi-step approval process could be much bigger in comparison to a field label change, right? So this is how you visualize and do a relative sizing. All right, I'm going to open the floor for any question and answer. If you want, you could unmute and ask, or you could put it in the chat as well.